Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to make the 6-inch motif that makes up the Modern Rose Afghan, which is a free pattern on mooglyblog.com. For this video I'll be using Lion Brand Yarns 24/7 cotton, which is the same yarn used in the pattern itself, a Furls Odyssey hook, and clover locking ring stitch markers, which are my favorite kind. All of these are big faves. You can find links to all of them on my blog post that includes this video tutorial. So let's begin. Let me move these out of the way, and I'll move these to the side, but those will definitely come into play here in a few minutes. Now, to make this square, I'm going to start with my main color. And this is the same color in this pattern that I used for sort of the backdrop for all these squares. So, oops, I started just automatically with the slip knot, but that's not how you start this pattern. We're going to start with a magic circle, and if you haven't done that before, there is a link to that tutorial separately. So, but I'm going to go ahead and begin with my magic ring, or magic circle, and in that magic circle, I'm going to make 6 stitches with this main color. I'm going to start with a single crochet, then a half double crochet, and then 4 double crochets. At this point, I can pull my finger out. There we are. And make 4 double crochets right into that ring. If you're not familiar with the magic circle, again, there's a separate video tutorial for that. Since I'm going to be walking you all the way through this square, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the specific stitches that have tutorials out there already. All right, so I've got my 6 stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I do that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, okay. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker right through that active loop, and I like to catch the end too. This keeps that loop from coming undone while I do other things, because now it's time to pull in the contrast color. Here I'm using the lilac. Now for this, I do want to start with a slip knot. Just the usual one right there on the hook, like so. Then I'm going to go back to this magic circle. You'll see I have not pulled it closed because I'm going to work 6 more stitches in here. I'm going to go right into the ring and make a single crochet. This is joining with a single crochet or a standing single crochet right there. So I don't join and then chain 1, I just join with a single crochet. Then from there, it's just as before, half double crochet, and then 4 double crochets, all right in that ring. 1, 2, 3, and 4, like so. And then I will pull up that loop and put another stitch marker in it, like so. Now this is where I finally pull that magic ring close. Take that short end and just pull it tight. And we've got our first round of the pattern. So at this point, I go back to the main color. I take this stitch marker out, and I want to work 2 double crochets in each stitch of the contrast color. So I find that first single crochet right there. I work 2 double crochets right in there, 2 double crochets in the next one, and so on right across for a total of 12 double crochets made with the main color here. So I'll continue on around, and the nice thing is, starting here with, officially I believe this is round 2, you only work up until close to the end. It'll change, but for now you only work main color stitches in the contrast color stitches. So right now I'm working with the main color, I'm only working into the contrast color, and when I work with the contrast color, that will only be worked into main color stitches, just to help you keep track. So coming up here on the last one, and since this one is open a little bit, it helps to hold on to the active loop a little bit so it doesn't get big and open here, just to hold it still while you crochet into it. And I really love using stitch markers on this pattern. I know a lot of people say they can crochet without them, and you can, but believe me, it will help you keep track of the stitches for this so much easier. And why make it harder? It's supposed to be fun. So I pull up my loop, pull out my hook, put my stitch marker in there. It's time to go back to the contrast color. Now, eventually, as you're working with these yarns, they can get a little tangled. It's always a good idea as you move between colors just to take some time to untangle them a little bit. So now that that's done, I know my stitches are secured because I've used my stitch markers. I'm going to go ahead and start this one. But before I do that, I want to go back and look at these. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 stitches that I worked 2 double crochets into each. If I put a stitch marker in the first one of those stitches that I worked with the main color, then I'm going to know that I need to stop before I reach that point when I'm working with a contrast color. Let me show you what I mean. Let's do the contrast color part of round 2. I'll pull that stitch marker out. Oops, put that in that way. There we are. Now for this is where later on we're going to work our 3D stitches. So from here on out, all the contrast color stitches will have a chain 1 in between the double crochets or between the other stitches when we get later, right towards the end. But for now, we chain 1, double crochet in the first one. That's always a hard one to go into, isn't it? There we go. Then we chain 1 and double crochet in the next stitch. And just as before we were working into 6 stitches, this time we're going to work into 6 stitches. And if you count the chains as a stitch, then again, we're working 12 stitches here. Remember, we just worked 12 stitches with our main color. So if you include the chains, we're now working 12 stitches with our contrast color. So chain 1 and double crochet in the first 6 main color stitches like so. And you can see when we do that, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We end in the stitch right before that stitch marker. And that is just a great visual cue to let you know if you get distracted or you lose count, hey, I've gotten to where I need to stop with this. Have I finished my repeats? And in this case, we have. So we pull up our hook and insert our stitch marker, and it's time to go back to the main color. So we're beginning round 3. This is the main color section, main color section, main color section, main color section, main color section. Oops, all right. Almost lost my stitch anyway. Okay, so for this one, we're going to be working into the chain spaces, not the chains themselves, but into the chain spaces as well as into the stitches. So we work 1 double crochet in the chain space. And since that's our first stitch with the main color, I'll go ahead and put the stitch marker in there. Oops, doesn't want to close. Too much in my hands. There we go. All right. So 1 double crochet in the chain space, followed by 2 double crochets in the next stitch. And we're going to do that 6 times. That's our repeat. Pull up a little bit more yarn here. With this yarn, I like to pull from the outside of the ball. I feel it just tangles a lot less and works out a lot better. So I've got 1 followed by 2, so we go to 1 in the next chain space and 2 double crochets in the next stitch. And I know I'm moving quickly. I'm assuming if you're attempting a spiral, you already have a good handle on how to make double crochets. If I'm wrong, again, there's a separate video tutorial for that available on the channel. So remember, for this one, it's just 1 in the chain space and 2 in the stitch. And that gives us our increase. Oops, I can see here at the very end, I noticed I made a mistake. You look and see we've got 2 contrast color stitches here without a chain space in between. Here's the great thing. I can pull this stitch up and high, nice and high, put a stitch marker in it so it doesn't come out. And I'm going to go ahead and fix my error. Just going to go right back to this contrast color. Before it's too late, pull out that last stitch, chain 1, and work that last one right there. No harm, no foul. Love that about crochet. So much easier to go back and fix your mistakes. than with so many other crafts, especially the ones that include glue. Oof. All right, here we are. We've got 2 double crochets in the stitch. Then we've got our last repeat from before, so we go 1 in the chain 1 space and 2 in that last stitch. Again, holding on to the active loop of the contrast color sort of helps stabilize it so you can work into it a little easier here. All right, and believe it or not, that's it for the first half of round 3. And we're ready to start with our contrast color again. Now this one's going to be in the way, so I'm going to go ahead and take that one out because we're ready to work into that stitch. And I'll take out the one holding open my contrast color here. And this is where things start to get a little bit more complicated with the repeats. When I originally wrote the pattern, I was working on this actually right up to the last minute, and I typed it up the morning that it went live. So full disclosure, there was an error in this part of round 3, but it has now been fixed. So what we're going to do is chain 1, skip the next stitch, double crochet in the next stitch, and then we chain 1 and double crochet in the next stitch twice. So, and that's twice a repeat of the chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch. So we chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next one, chain 1, double crochet in the next one, then chain 1 and double crochet in the next one after that. So that's our repeat for that one. The way I like to visualize it, just to keep track as I'm doing it, I skip 1 and then double crochet in the next 3. But that's of course with the chain 1 in between each of those. So let's do it again. We chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, chain 1, double crochet in the next, chain 1, double crochet in the next. That's our second repeat. So for our third one, we chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, chain 1, double crochet in the next, chain 1, oops, and now we're ready for more purple yarn, right at the end, of course. That's how it always works, right? There we go. All right, and double crochet in the next. And that's the end of our third repeat, and just as a visual cue, I know that we're in the right spot because that stitch marker is right there. So we're ready to put our stitch marker in that one and head back over to the first color. Here we are, the main color. So we're ready to begin round, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, round 4. So for this one, I'm going to start with 2 double crochets in the chain space. And I'm going to pick up my stitch marker here and put a stitch marker in the first one of those 2 because that's the first one of the round. Pull up a little bit more of the ecru yarn. I would have used white like I did in the pattern, but I actually ran out. I used it all up making the blanket. So I had just a little bit left. There we are. All right, so we've got our 2 in the chain space. Then I'm going to make 1 in the next stitch, and then 1 in the stitch after that, or excuse me, in the chain 1 space. So 2 in the chain space, 1 in the stitch, 1 in the chain space, then 2 in the next stitch, and then followed by 1 in the chain space, and 1 in the stitch after that. And that is a little bit long, but that is the first repeat for this round. 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. And the reason it takes all of that to do the repeat is because the first 2 is in a chain space and the second 2 is in a stitch. But those 8 stitches total is your first repeat. So that's what we're going to do again. We're starting in a chain space, we double crochet 2, then double crochet in the next stitch and in the next chain space. And I know I'm moving quickly. If, oops, got a little tangle here. If I'm moving a little too quickly for you in this, keep in mind this is an accompaniment to the written pattern, so it doesn't have to stand alone. You can definitely read along with the written pattern as you go, and of course, it's this video. You can rewind it as many times as needed. So, time for 2 in the stitch, 1 in the space, and 1 in the next stitch. and that finishes our second repeat. So one more of those repeats and I'll be done with the first half of round 4. So 2 in the first chain space, pull up a little more yarn. Always the problem in long patterns like this, long demos. Always have to stop to pull up more yarn. If you pull out too much ahead of time, as I'm sure you know, it all gets tangled. So got 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. And that's really the easiest way to remember this. If you think of the chain space and the stitches as sort of the same, it's just 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. I think we all have those mental shortcuts when we're crocheting and keeping track of a pattern. So there we have it. That is the first half of round 4. You can see we're really getting that neat spiral effect with our stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker in that. And then we'll finish round 4 here with our contrast color. Go ahead and pull up a bit of yarn while we're at a stopping point. I really love this yarn. I've had a lot of questions about it because it is cotton and it doesn't look like what most people think of when they think of cotton yarn. We all think of the sort of the kitchen cotton types. This one's mercerized, which means it's been treated with chemicals, safe chemicals, don't worry about that. I think people hear the word chemicals and freak out a little bit, but it's been treated and processed a little bit. It's still 100% cotton, but it gives us this really nice sheen and keeps it from fuzzing up, like I think we tend to think of with a lot of cottons. So it's just a really nice cotton yarn to work with, lighter for summer, but without having that heavy kitchen cotton feel that you can get. So let me pull this one up out of the way here, and we'll begin the second half of round 4. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to chain 1. Remember, we always have that chain 1 in between, double crochet in the next stitch, then chain 1, skip the next stitch, and double crochet in the stitch after that. And that right there is our repeat for this one. So this is our repeat. We chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch, double crochet in the stitch after that. And in my own head, I think of these as little arches. You can see our repeat started right here. We've got an arch and an arch. Those are 2 repeats. So for this row, there are 6 total. So we'll have 6 little arches. Remember, there's always that chain space in between though. So we are almost all the way around here. Well, halfway through. Now a little more than half. Chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the stitch after that, chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the stitch after that. And that is the end of round 4. And we are ready for round 5, which is where things do tend to get the most complicated. So I'll try and take that one a little bit slower here in just a second. All right, so let's begin round 5. Now I'm going to go back to the main color here. I've pulled up some more yarn, but of course it wants to tangle. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and take that stitch marker out, and let's begin. Now, for this one, remember we had 2 and then 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. We're going to start this one with 2 and then 3 singles. So let me show you what I mean here. Makes sense in my head, but it doesn't always make sense when I say it, which is, I guess, why there's a formal way of writing patterns. So I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker in the first one of the 2 to mark the beginning of this round. And then I'm going to do 1 in the next stitch, 1 in the next chain space, and 1 in the next stitch. That's our first part of our row 5 or round 5 is 2 in the chain space, then 3 singles. So we do that 3 times. So let's start the second one. 2 in the chain space. Remember, we're still just making double crochets. Then 3 all alone. 1 in the stitch, 1 in the next chain space, and 1 in the next stitch, like so. Okay, so 1 more of those. 2 in the next chain space, 1 in the next stitch, 1 in the next chain space, and 1 in the next stitch. Okay, so that is our 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, our 3 repeats that begin row 5. Once again, my yarn wants to tangle up on me. There we go. Okay, so this is the slightly tricky part of row 5. I'm going to make 2. I'm going to start just as before, 2 in the chain space, followed by 1 in the next stitch, and 1 in the chain space after that. And then we start shrinking our stitches. I'm going to do a half double crochet in the next stitch, 2 half double crochets in the next chain space, 1, 2, a half double crochet in the next stitch, and then after that I'm going to single crochet in the chain space, single crochet in the next stitch, 2 single crochets in the next chain space, 1, 2, and then you can see we've got a stitch, a chain space, and a stitch here. I'm going to slip stitch into each of these, but I'm going to make sure to do it loosely. Now, I did a video tutorial or a little tip about this before. I know I'm going to have to work into these slip stitches later, so I'm going to make sure to pull up the loop, make sure it's the same size loop as the other loop on the hook before I pull it through. And that'll just make it a little bit easier to work into. So, second one in the chain space, and third one right in the top of that last stitch of the contrast color. Then I'm going to very gently, I'm going to get some more yarn so I can do it, very gently pull up that loop because I don't want to close up that slip stitch at all. I want it to stay nice and open. And then we're ready for the contrast color. That wasn't too bad. This one gets a little crazier. Let me get this one out of the way, like so. And we'll begin the second half of round 5. So I'm going to start with a chain 1, as always, double crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch, double crochet in the stitch after that, then chain 1, skip the next stitch, double crochet in the stitch after that, chain 1, and then double crochet in the stitch immediately after that. Then, and that was the first section between the brackets if you're following along on the written pattern. So from there, I'm going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, double crochet in the stitch after that, then I'm going to go back and repeat the brackets. I'm going to chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the stitch after that, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the stitch after that. Oops, ran out of yarn halfway through my stitch here. Pull up some more of the lilac. So finish that double crochet. And unfortunately, that means I've lost my place. Now, this is why I said to be so careful with this row, but you can always go back and check your work. And believe you me, I made 36, actually I've made 38 of these squares now, and I still have to read through this one as I do it. So let's go back over our work a little bit and see where we're at. We chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, chain 1, and double crochet in the next, and that's our first bracket. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, then we go back to our bracket. Chain 1, double crochet in the next, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, then it's time to chain 1 and double crochet in the next, and that'll be our second pass through those bracketed instructions. So from here, we chain 1, skip 1, and half double crochet in the next stitch, like so. All right, then we chain 1, half double crochet in the next stitch, don't skip 1 there, like so, chain 1, skip 1, single crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, 2 single crochets in the next stitch, 1 and 2, and then from here we've got 3 stitches left. We're going to do slip stitches just as before. Again, we're going to be working into these later, so we want to pull them up nice and high before we finish the slip stitch. And rather than actually slip stitching in this one, I'm going to go ahead and give you a little tip here. I prefer to cut the yarn, because we're going to cut the yarn after that last slip stitch, but cut the yarn a stitch early, leaving a good 6 to 8 inches to work with. I'm going to go ahead and pull that on through the second to last stitch there. And using, oh, my yarn, my hook wants to roll away on my table here. I'm going to use my yarn needle, and I'm going to sew in that last stitch. So rather than making a slip stitch here, I'm going to go under both loops of that third stitch. I'm going to keep it real loose, because again, I need to crochet into this later, and then go back through the center. Let me get it towards the camera here. Right through, and then right under that next stitch right there. I'm going to pull it through again, not too tight. I want to make sure I can get my hook in there later. But from there, I can weave in the ends, and it's just a little bit nicer and neater than doing a finishing off with a slip stitch and then a knot. This way there's no knot. And I'm just going to leave that tail for now, and I'll weave it in at the end when I've got a little more substance here to work into. So that is the end of our contrast color. So from here on out, we're only going to be working with the main color. So that makes it a little bit easier. And we're also done working in spirals. From here on out, we're actually going to be squaring up our circle so that it becomes a 6-inch motif. So, unlike before when we didn't have to chain because we were working in a spiral, it's time to chain. Now, what I want to do is I want to start the next round in this chain space, because we don't want to start here as that was the last stitch of the previous round. We want to come over here. So I'm going to slip stitch right into that chain space. And here you need to make a decision. If you like the chainless starting double crochet, which I do have a separate tutorial for, you can do that here. That's what I do when I make my squares. Or you can chain 3 instead and count that as your first double crochet, whichever you prefer. I'm going to make a chainless starting double crochet right in that chain space, and that will count as my first double crochet. Again, if you prefer, you can do a chain 3. Then I'm going to chain 2 and double crochet again right in that chain space. So if you prefer chains, it would actually be a chain 5, 3 for the double crochet, and then 2 for the chain 2, or chainless starting double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. We've made our first corner. From there, we're going to double crochet in the next stitch, double crochet in the chain space after that, then pull up some more yarn, as you do. There we are. We're going to work a half double crochet in the next stitch, half double crochet in the stitch after that, or excuse me, the chain space, half double crochet in the stitch after that. At this point, we're really treating the chain spaces as if they were stitches. So we work a corner, 2 double crochets, 3 half double crochets. We're going to follow that with 4 single crochets. So 1 in the chain space, 1 in the stitch, oops, 1 in the chain space, 1 in the stitch, and then we're back to half double crochets. We want to do 3 of those again. 1 in the chain space, 1 in the stitch, 1 in the chain space, and then 2 double crochets. 1 in the stitch, and 1 in the chain space. And that, including the corner, the first corner there is our first side. So it's time to make another corner. This time we're going to be starting in a chain. Remember, the first corner is in a chain space, so you want your second corner to be in a stitch. So that's a double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet. Like so, right there, okay? Pull up some more yarn. It wants to wiggle away from me on the table here. There we go. Now, just as before, we're going to do 2 double crochets. This time the first one's going to be in the chain space, then a stitch, followed by 3 half double crochets. I'm going to show you something neat about the stitch markers here in a minute, so keep in mind we've still got 1 stitch marker in there. So a half double crochet in the chain space, a half double crochet in the stitch, and a half double crochet in the chain space after that. And we've got our 4 single crochets, 1 in the stitch, 1 in the chain space, 1 in the stitch. And this can get tricky. Remember to reference your previous row if you're having trouble distinguishing your stitches at this point. Next in the chain space, that's our 4 single crochets. Excuse me. And now this gets really easy to tell if you're on track, because we've got our pair of single crochets there worked into 1 stitch. So I know in the first one of those is where I need to start my half double crochets. So I put the first half double crochet in there, the second half double crochet in the next single crochet, the third half double crochet goes into the first of those slip stitches, like so, and then the 2 double crochets go in those last 2 slip stitches. So 1, and because I made those nice and big, they're very easy to get my hook into, and 2. And that's the end of our second side, beginning with our second corner. Now, this is the cool thing about having this stitch marker here left over from when we began that last round. I know that this last slip stitch was actually worked into this stitch. It would be really easy for me to just keep crocheting and make that first corner in that stitch, but that's not what I want to do because this last slip stitch is worked into this stitch. So I know when I get to this point, I want to work my third corner of this round into the marked stitch. And that having that stitch marker there will really save you a lot of headaches. It's just a little visual reminder. It might look like you're skipping a stitch, but you're really not, because that last slip stitch is worked into that stitch right there. So remember, our corner is a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. And from there, again, we just work the same thing. 2 double crochets, 3 half double crochets, 4 single crochets, 3 half double crochets, 2 double crochets, and a corner all the way around. And we'll end up doing the same thing over here, where you know when you get down to those 2 single crochets by themselves, right before the slip stitches, you know you've got your half double crochets and your last 2 double crochets will be in those last 2 slip stitches. And from there, you join to either the chain 3 or the top of the chainless starting half double crochet, and then you chain 1 and work single crochet all the way around. I won't make you sit through all of that. That's obviously the longest part. But here we have a finished one where I've gone ahead and woven in all the ends, and you can see there's a round of single crochet. With the round of single crochet, it's just a single crochet in each stitch, which with 3 single crochets in each chain 2 space for the final round. It isn't a perfectly square, but that's okay. You can block it out, or you don't have to. When I put the blanket together, I didn't block it out at all. I just sewed them to each other, and it worked out beautifully. You can see if you did block it out, it might square out that spiral a little bit in the middle, and that's okay too. In fact, a lot of people, I think, really like the look of this spiral just the way it is, without the 3D portion that you'll see, that you do see in the blanket that we showed at the beginning of the video, and that, of course, you can get the pattern for in the blog. Just having this mesh here is a really attractive look all on its own. But at this point is where, if you want to, you can add the really fun 3D spiral. And this is where we bring back in the contrast color. I'm going to pull up a whole bunch of yarn here, and I won't make you watch me do the whole spiral. I think I can do the beginning, and you will definitely get the hang of it. It is very simple, although it is difficult to describe in words, so I'm excited to get to show it to you. I'm going to start with a slip knot on my hook, just as before when we brought in the contrast color. I'm going to join with a single crochet. Now, I marked it out on the pattern, but we want to look for the last double crochet that was made in round 1. Remember, round 1, there were no chain 1s in between, so it's that one right there. It should be relatively easy to find. There's no big space. It's that one right there. I'm going to go around it as if I was going to make a post stitch, a front post stitch, like so. I'm going to pull up a loop and make a single crochet. So I'm joining with a single crochet as if it was a post stitch. And you'll notice I've picked up the square and sort of folded it here. Just makes it easier to keep working around that stitch. So I've got a single crochet. I'm going to follow that with a half double crochet right around that post, and a double crochet like so. And there you go. And that's how we join that. Now, this little end sticking up here, obviously when I go to weave in the ends, I would weave it in so that it gets pulled to the back. So I'll just go ahead and do that with my hook now so it doesn't get in the way, like so. Okay, you'll also notice that I started at the top of the stitch and worked my way down. And that's what I'm going to do for each of these stitches. Each of these parts of the 3D flower. I'm going to go to the next double crochet here in the spiral. I'm going to start at the top of the post and I'm going to work 3 double crochets right around the post as if they were post stitches. Whoops, dropped the whole hook. That's not how you do it. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, like so. 3 post stitches right around the hook. They don't look like your typical post stitches because they don't lay flat. Because there's 3 of them, they actually stand up, and that's how you create the 3D look. Let's do that again. I'm going to yarn over, find my next double crochet in the spiral here. Start right at the top, and it helps sometimes just to get a really firm hold on the bottom of that stitch. Kind of got to engage both hands to make this part. And I'm going to make 3 double crochets again. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. I'm going to make 3 double crochets around, I believe it's 37 of these stitches total. So I'm going to keep going to the next one, starting at the top and making 3 double crochets around each one until I get right about to the end. Like so. Okay, and you can see, if I pull the hook out of the way here, you can actually see we're starting to get that 3D popped up look of our flower. Now, when I do weave in this end, I'm going to make sure to pull it down tight so that this end of the spiral kind of just fades right into the center here. And then I'm going to continue to work my way out. Now, when I get to the end here, I know I want to end on the first of the 2 single crochets that are together. So this is the stitch right here, which is actually, it looks like the first half double crochet. That one gets 3 double crochets worked around it, just as around all the others. We just work our way on out with the yarn. 3 half double crochets right there, or excuse me, 3 double crochets right there. On the stitch after that, 2 double crochets only. So on that second half double crochet, you only work 2 double crochets around it. The one after that, you work 2 half double crochets, and then you finish with a single crochet around the first of the pair. So when you get to that point, you're going to go, and this one's a little tricky, you kind of have to just use brute force. Come up right under the white part here, you can see that's right in between the 2 stitches, like so, and then you should be able to pull your yarn back around through and make a single crochet, like so. So you pull that single crochet through, finish your stitch, cut your yarn, and weave in your end down here, on the back side, of course. So that is how you make the Modern Rose Afghan, the 6-inch square that is the basis for the whole thing. Be sure to check out the tutorial on mooglyblog.com for links to everything. I've got links to the hook, the pattern, of course, the stitch markers, the yarn, and you can get all the different sizes you might want to make this blanket in. I've got it listed with baby, twin, king, queen, full, basically all the main sizes. And of course you can make any custom size. It's a 6-inch square approximately. So just figure out how wide you want it to be and how many 6-inch squares that'll be and go from there. A skein, or 2 skeins of Lion Brand Yarns 24/7 cotton will make 8 squares. So that will help you figure out the math on how much yarn to buy too. That will actually leave you a little bit left over that will help you sew them together. To sew them together, I used the mattress stitch, which again has a separate tutorial on mooglyblog.com, which will be linked in the tutorial for this one. So be sure to check that out if you need that help too. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this video, as long as it may be. I hope you've enjoyed crocheting along with me. If you have, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and I want to thank you so much for sticking with me and watching.